Good afternoon, Stephanie Hayes. You don't look like my friend Anthony Franco.
I'm not Anthony Franco.
And let's just be thankful for that fact. But where it's like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
He got fired. Yeah. He got fired from the podcast, so it's just you and me now.
It was inevitable. His dad joke game was fairly questionable. And, what real value other than that fantastic haircut did he add to this conversation?
I think maybe the comic book background, but the rest of it is suspect. But I'll tell you,
exceptionally questionable.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I am thinking of starting up a new business.
Really? Tell me.
Yeah. Cleaning mirrors. I can see myself doing it for sure.
Oh God, that was just too good. It's funny because I was just thinking about lunch and I was going to eat this vegan bologna, but I was just thinking it's like phony bologna. It's like, yeah.
That's a choice for sure.
Oh, Stephanie, before we get started acknowledging this little project of ours is now the 100th episode that we've done, and far and away the best looking one now that Anthony's not here, which is great.
Congratulations to both of you.
Oh, wow.
I'm honored to be part of it.
Yeah, it's also thank you for filling in, and thank you for anybody that's actually watched more than 5 minutes of any of the episodes. We genuinely appreciate that. That is terrific.
If you can get past the dad jokes.
If you get it's usually where we lose people. If we see the demographics, the moment the dad jokes come out.
Right. There's actually pretty good content after that.
No, absolutely. You got to fight through the dad jokes. Stephanie, in 1901, a steel magnate named Andrew Carnegie sold his company for about $480 million, what we would consider to be about $15 billion today. But here's what most people don't know. He'd been secretly buying back his own company stock for years while his competitors focused on expanding production. When asked about his wealth-building philosophy, Carnegie once said, "The way to become rich is to put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket very, very carefully." Most founders do the opposite. They spread themselves thin, chasing growth while their equity gets diluted into nothing. Today, Stephanie, we're going to be talking about on How to Founders, about scaling smart, not just scaling fast. I'm Chris Frank, Stephanie Hayes filling in for
whatever his name was,
guy Anthony Franco, and we are joined today by Mr. John St.Pierre, who's questioning his decisions at this point. Like, what sort of podcast did I agree to join here? But we appreciate having you, John. John St.Pierre learned the hard way what happens when you scale recklessly. After getting fired from his own $50 million company, he developed 7 strategic principles that helped him build his next venture to over $100 million the right way. John, welcome. Thank you for being here. We genuinely appreciate it. So just talk me through this. What is this thing about us trying to build wealth in our companies? We just don't worry about that, right? Just build great companies and everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah, growth for growth's sake can kill you. We can start there. And I love your story that you opened up with Carnegie. And do we protect and grow our own equity in the businesses that we build, or do we just give it away loosely, not thinking about the terminal value of actual equity in business? So that is one of the principles that I talk about a lot. But yeah, my journey was met with a pretty big abrupt stop of falling off the cliff after 15 years of co-founding a business, growing a business, an amazing culture, an amazing organization, amazing people. I made some fatal mistakes and I put myself in very vulnerable positions that ultimately 6 months after raising $20 million of private equity capital, I was on the street and I was fired from my very own company that was my heart and soul, everything that I had built for 15 years, and left with nothing. And had to learn some hard lessons through that journey and pick myself back up off the pavement and figure out really what were the learnings from that experience? What would I never do again? Would I try and make sure entrepreneurs never do what I did in that situation? But in order to crystallize those, I had to execute them. So went to execute them in another business and helped grow that company. That we did grow to 100 million. Still own that company today. Still the majority owner of that business today. Still trying to protect my equity in that business today. And then just
the equity, right? Like that's the second time around you learned.
That's right.
Stephanie, it feels to me like this story that you told was very, very common for an entire generation. Like when I was coming up, it was basically not if, but when somebody's going to try to fire you as the founder and CEO of the company. Has that been your experience too?
Yeah, you know what? I think founders have a lifespan, right? And I think the percentage of founders who actually, start with the company and end up growing the company to $100 million or beyond, I think they're the unicorns, right? And I'm imagining that as we get further into it with John, we're going to hear about his intentionality and his own self-awareness and his own development of his own, skills around that leadership area. But from my experience, and I think it's okay for a founder to have a lifespan that doesn't necessarily end up in the 100 million range, right? So being aware of yourself and understanding where your strengths are. John, I'm so curious, is that part of your journey? Oh, I got to unmute.
Oh, muted you. Usually people try to mute me. So
sorry about that. Yeah. No, the journey is it. I actually wrote a book called The $100 Million Journey, which is exactly that, which is this journey that we all take as entrepreneurs, trying to grow the business of our dreams, not realizing that there's pitfalls out there. And, the messy middle, as I like to call it, when you try and grow your business from a lifestyle business that's doing very well for yourself to try and get to the next level, there's pitfalls. There's the growth paradox that's involved in that. You got messy middle components. You got, the ability to grow your business and be able to have the cash flow to fund its own growth without having to go to banks or investors and do all those different things. So, yeah, I through my journey, I think the biggest thing in my earlier years, which is not that long ago, I just wanted to grow. The growth was like the fuel and the energy that I love to have, and didn't really pay attention to equity or how much cash flow I needed to grow my own business, and just felt that, hey, if I grow a business to be very large, I'm going to do very well for myself. But yet, as I kept doing that, I was working harder, working longer hours, having more stress, needing to raise more capital, needing to go to the bank and put more personal guarantees on the line, had to do all those different things to then wake up that one day, Stephanie, and wonder like, okay, what did I do all that for the last 15 years? Because I just lost everything.
I don't want to dwell because I know it's a painful thing, but let's just start kind of on that dark side and about the decisions you made, and then start to talk about how you've sort of changed that. So culmination of decisions probably, but it sounds like you brought in some investors, you got diluted to the point where there's just not a whole lot of equity left. What was the mechanics around your deal?
Yeah, well, I think that's maybe the end result of the situation. We had a company that was doing around $10 million in global sales. And I read the book 10X and I'm really motivated. I'm like, hey, let's get this thing to 100 million in 5 years. Let's go. I have a game plan how we're going to do this. And we're going to do it through organic growth. We're going to diversify into other business lines. We're going to do some acquisitions. We're going to kind of grow this way. And we had a pretty profitable business. We were doing really well in our business lines. But slowly I was taking positive cash flow from some business lines, investing it in the shiny objects. I was then consuming our cash flow, and then going to acquire some businesses that we had to go to the bank and get some debt. And so we were levering up our balance sheet along the way. And you get to a certain position where, okay, we have a little bit too much debt on the balance sheet. Our cash flow isn't working as well anymore because we're taking profits and we're putting them onto starting new business lines that aren't as profitable or losing money in the first few years. And so we were growing ourselves poor. And the only way to fix that is to go to the street and say, hey, who wants to invest in this company? Look how fast we're growing. When we did a round of 5 million, we got diluted, did another round of 20 million, which I invested in as well with my wife and I. We invested in that round ourselves as well. And then, a new group comes in and says, oh, we could do this better. Right. And you put yourself in that vulnerable position to look back and go, well, why did I have to grow so fast? What can I have done it a different way? And I'll never forget my wife, when we were about to raise that last round, going, you sure you want to do this? Like, why don't you guys just grow slower? I'm like, no, I got this. I got this.
Never. Faster. Must go faster.
Absolutely.
Everything. Right.
And so imagine the rude awakening that day. And I called the chapter in my book, Death in the Boardroom. And it was literally after a board meeting at our annual event where they said, hey, thanks for coming. We're bringing somebody else in. This is 6 months after they invested in the business, and how dumbfounded I was as to what had just happened. And, you talk about equity. I mean, I started off that business as one of the co-founders of it. And at the time of that firing, owned 8% of the business.
What did you not see?
I didn't see that you need to build your own capital for growth to do it the right way. And you mentioned earlier, Chris, in the introduction, I have 7 principles of entrepreneurial success. Principle 1 is protect and grow your equity at all costs and gain more of it if you can, like Carnegie did. Number 2 is you have to build your own capital for growth. Because if you don't build your own capital for growth, you got to go hat in hand to the banks and get loans. You got to go get investors to deliver your balance sheet. You start going down that way. We could have easily, Stephanie, with that business, grown slower with our own cash flow. And in principle 3, I talk about you have to reinvest your cash flow smartly. So we were generating positive, very good cash flows from our businesses, and we were taking it and we were burning it over here on these new shiny object opportunities to try and grow the business faster. And so, we had a lot of cash waste. And I talked in the book about this formula called the self-financeable growth rate. How fast can your company afford to grow? Well, our company from a net operating cash flow perspective could probably grow 5-10% a year. We were trying to grow like 50, 60, 70% a year. We couldn't afford it. So we had to go finance it. And by financing it, we put ourselves behind the ball. That wasn't necessary.
I think that what you're bringing up, John, is I think it's in our first 100 episodes of doing this, it's one of the probably 3 things that come out the most, which is when I came up in the startup world, we used to believe that raising the round was the goal. We used to celebrate getting VC money. We used to celebrate those big rounds. And it was just this model whereby it was really just VC or bust. It was about raising capital. It was about growing incredibly fast. I think what you're saying, John, is some of those, there's some businesses where that matters, but I'm starting to believe that those businesses are fewer and fewer and fewer. And I'm hearing such a counter movement now back to what John is saying, which is just build a great business. Build a business that you can grow. If you've got positive cash flow, you can reinvest that if you do it intelligently. Does that ring a bell with you, Stephanie?
Well, you know that my business and my focus is all on building assets inside your business and building up for a more valuable exit rather than the hyper growth. And I know with my new partner, where we're just building our new business, she came out of an organization that had grown from 50 employees to 600 in 6 months. And you think about the ability to, and of course, everything imploded, right? So I grew up in the .com space and went through the whole .com boom and bust. And so I've always been sort of wired to be a little bit more cautious about, because you saw all that very, very early, right? The hyper fixation on growth and the hyper growth, and just kind of what we ended up with. So tell me, John, when you're in that hyper growth phase, what are some of the things that you want to be mindful of and careful of? How do you balance off? Because it's you're still going to maybe go for money and you're still going to need some sort of capital. So how do you balance that need for growth with, what are the things you're looking for and what are the levers you want to pull to ensure that you're being smart and sustainable and also achieving the growth that, an investor might be looking for?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. And I was part of the .com rush as well and crash as well. And I think some of that actually fueled my desire.
So old, not like me. Like I was, I was 8 when that happened. So,
Chris, I'm turning 50 in July. I expected birthday present.
I know, and I'm actually older than both of you. So anyway, but yeah, that's the.
Well,
go ahead, John.
No, it's funny because I feel like a little bit of that .com dream fueled my desire to continue to grow businesses because we failed that first time, right? And as you're growing the business, though. If I just focus on those first 3 principles that I just articulated, if you don't protect your equity and you don't build your cash flow to finance your growth and you don't reinvest smartly, it all unwinds. because then you don't have the cash flow for growth. You have to give up equity to do it, and you lose control of the ship. And so the way that I look at it today, Stephanie, is you can grow. I subsequently grew our company, another business, to 100 million the right way. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There's always, landmines and other situations that happen, but we did it in control of our own destiny. We're now a debt-free company. We have, really good people in place. We have CEO, presidents, vice presidents that run that business, so I don't have to be there every day. But the business is on a solid foundation footing. Now, it wasn't necessarily the whole ride up. There was different challenges, but we didn't go raise capital. I didn't dilute my equity. We didn't dilute control of the business. We grew to the pace that we could afford to grow. And when you grow to the pace you can afford to grow, you kind of protect your balance sheet, you protect your cap table, you protect everything that's there. And we could afford a bump here and a bump there because no one was going to come in and fire me at that particular point. And I think that's the one thing that today, when I talk to entrepreneurs, I think I've convinced at least a dozen so far to not raise capital. Go find it in your own P&L. How much management influence waste do you have in your P&L today? And I'll give you a really good example. In my own company, we did this exercise last year in October, and we basically did a zero-based budgeting exercise, and we eliminated $2 million of overhead from our business that was just management influence waste. Software we didn't use anymore over here, or duplication of things over here, or duplication of roles over here. But yet when we run our small business, we're always stuck in that debate of how do you grow? Because if you grow, you need to hire more people. If you hire more people, you have more costs. You have more costs, you're making less money. And there's that growth paradox that happens that as you grow your business. How do you manage that has been really a secret sauce that's very difficult for entrepreneurs to figure out, is how do you grow the right way without overhiring too fast and then needing more capital, but then, string it along some years where you have to maybe roll up your sleeves and work a little bit harder to get to that next level before you can hire the next person. So that type of growth phase, I think, is what entrepreneurs struggle with a lot.
It's the thing is, so the podcast is called How to Founder. It's mainly designed for early stage founders, but I think that this is such a critical point. And Stephanie, I don't know that we brought it up in any of the previous 100 episodes, which is, if you're considering growing a company, one of the things that you have to do is give up on sort of a story, a narrative about the quick flip of like, I started a .com, and this was all of our experience in the .com stuff. Started a .com, 18 months later, we're billionaires and we'll never work again. First of all, no founder never works again. That's like the dumbest thing in the world. You can't keep a founder away from business. It's like they're going to go do something, right? And so, but that's the narrative. It's this 18 to 24 month thing. John, how long have you been current company?
The current business was started in 2003. I was one of the co-founders of that business as well, but been focusing on it heavily the last 5 years.
And so, and you've grown that organically, and your growth rate's been outstanding, and you've gone in now to the point where you're not even in the day-to-day. You just get to sit back and, enjoy being sort of, are you on the board, or just sort of an advisor at this point? Chief strategy officer. Chief strategy officer is always the greatest title.
I'll call myself chairman and CFO.
There you go. Okay. I always want to be a chief strategy officer because there's no accountability to chief strategy.
You can be you can make a little company and be chief strategy officer, and you can talk to yourself all day.
Right. Exactly. That's perfect.
John, I have like 55 questions for you.
Okay.
And so this is going to be a 5-hour long episode.
Love it.
What are the indicators? Like what are the indicators that things are getting unbalanced? And what are you watching for as you're growing? And if you think about the new business, what were you watching for that would, help you realize that maybe we're going a little too fast, or maybe we're getting a little out of balance? Like, what are those indicators that a CEO can be conscious of, and, what would you keep on your dashboard now?
Yeah. And I'll also bring it to the founder mode, Chris, that you mentioned about, right? I think one of the first things that we see a lot when people start their businesses is they give away their equity too loosely, and they don't think about the terminal value of equity. They say, hey, Stephanie, Chris, I got a good idea. Let's be a third, and just start something, even though I have the idea, I have the concept, I have everything, and they try and partner with people for a lot of different reasons. And I think that's a first indicator. You have to be careful about that. You have to be careful about giving away your equity too loosely. I talk a lot about this, but from a founder perspective, there's kind of this idea that Chris, you mentioned, that I got to go raise capital for my business. And I love it. I don't watch it all the time, but I remember, key episodes of Shark Tank, right? Where Mark Cuban's like, look, you don't need capital. Just go sell some more widgets and you'll create your own capital. So a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. I'm a big fan of it. And there's a cash section in that book. And that cash section was written by a guy named Alan Miltz. He co-wrote it with Vern Harnish. And he said, out of interviewing 3,000 CEOs, not one of them could tell him what their net operating cash flow was in a given year. They all knew their P&L. They all knew what their profit said there, and they could look at their balance sheet and maybe understand it, but they didn't really know what their net operating cash flow was and how important cash is to fueling your growth. And if your business generates cash, it can reinvest its cash at a certain pace to grow. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs outpace that spending versus how much they can afford to grow because of what Chris said. I want to grow this quick thing and I want to flip it. And so when they do that, they sell their equity or give away equity to have people join their team, as opposed to retaining that equity and growing a little slower, but in more of a controlled pace. We all know the shiny object syndrome, which is in principle 3, not reinvesting the money the right way. So if you have cash flow that's being generated, are you putting it in the machine that's going to generate more cash flow? Or are you burning it over on the fire pit over here because you're making bad hires, you're making bad shiny object following decisions, those kinds of things. I think that one has cost me a lot. If I think about how much waste from decisions we've made over the years, it scares me just even thinking about it. But we do that a lot as entrepreneurs as we make those types of decisions. And I'd say another indicator here to answer your question, Stephanie, is, are you building the right culture of intrapreneurship in your business? Are you starting a job, or are you trying to be a business owner? And if you don't build the right culture within your business of empowering your team to have the authority and freedom to run the business, run different P&Ls of the business, give them more responsibility, develop mentorship and leadership within your organization, you are the product, I guess, right? Yeah, you're a slave to your business. And I think there's that quote, you're working for a lunatic, right? You're working for yourself. And so are you creating that business, or are you creating a job through that process? And so what I look for in the indicators are you protecting your equity? Are you building the right cash flow for growth? Are you reinvesting smartly? And are you building a culture of entrepreneurship within your business? Those first 4 principles of what I talk about in the 7 are so critical, because if you fail on any of those, it can unwind all the way back down. You'll fall back down the hill.
I want to just poke on one thing just real quick. And I want to ask both of you, and Stephanie, I want to ask you, and then I'll let you get back to your questions, which is how, so that you just said, don't go break shit, like don't go shiny object syndrome. But that's the definition of us as founders. Like, yes, we're ADHD, we love doing stuff, and things get boring when they're going well. Like, you want to have a little bit of chaos to solve. It's the way we're wired. Just tactically from both of you, what is things that you've done that have kept people like me from going and breaking something just for the sake of breaking it?
Stephanie, you want to go first?
I was going to say, John, I want to hear your answer to that question, because I have one as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to get away from the micro tactic, and I want to go a little more macro to start. When I had my big failure and I was trying to figure out what just happened here, I came to one pretty big realization. I didn't actually have a life plan for myself. I had some goals and some things I wanted to do in my life, but I didn't have a written down long-term 30-year life plan of what I'm trying to do in this thing called life. And so I had this business plan. We always would sit down with our business and create a strategic business plan, but we didn't have a life plan, or I didn't have a life plan. And so they were completely disjointed. One did not connect to the other. So today, when
you had built a company that was actually making you fucking miserable too.
Yeah, well, it wasn't making me miserable at that particular point, but still, they weren't connected to what my actual goals were, right? And so now I have a 30-year life plan, and I just turned 50 as well, right? 51 actually. So I have a life plan that completely has a 30-year objective, and I have a business plans that feed to that objective, what I'm trying to create. So at a macro level, that's the big overriding piece. On the micro level, whatever that strategic business plan is that we work with entrepreneurs, here's your 1-year plan, your quarterly objectives, your 3-year plan. We actually sign off that once that annual plan is created, we are not going to change anything until the next annual plans meeting. Like, we got our annual plan, we're going to stick to it. And so that creates that accountability to, we say what we're going to do. And I'll add the third last piece to it, which is you should only be reinvesting in your business in areas that are going to create more net operating cash flow. So you got to keep reinvesting in that machine that's working. If you have a service or product that's working, reinvest in the marketing and sales of that. So you've exhausted all the marketing and sales of that, because that's where your margins are. Go get that. And I typically tell entrepreneurs, until you get to $1 million of net operating cash flow, keep double downing on your winning products and services until you get to that point. When you get to that point, then maybe you can start testing out new product lines, doing different things, but you haven't exhausted the market yet until you get to that point. So those would be the three things: a life plan, very clear business strategic plan that you stick to on an annual basis, and then reinvest only where you can generate more net operating cash flow.
Stephanie, what do you think?
Well, my post-grad studies were in innovation management, so I have, a particular love in my heart for innovation and for creativity. But I also recognize that we want to build stability, and we want to build something inside the business that is an asset, right? And one of the things that I notice with the folks that I work with, is the business owners, is that I think they need to be conscious of redesigning their role on a regular basis. So, when you are early stage, just starting up, your role is to, set the direction and do all these things and be part of the delivery, blah, blah, blah. And then they inevitably get to this point where they're like, I want to sell my business because I hate it. And it's actually not that they hate their business, they hate their role in their business, and they are no longer, the business is stalling and it's not growing because they're focusing on operations, or they're focusing on the machine that they've built that is actually kind of working, and there's nobody charging ahead with growth. So when we redefine the role of a business owner in their business, now we can recognize where they need to start building up their support and their team and their systems and what have you, so that they can step out of that piece and now start to charge ahead with the next level of their growth, which requires them to be creative and requires them to be the ones sort of sniffing out and finding those areas of innovation. And I totally agree with you that we need to, build up the channels that are working until they are, you've exhausted the market. But I would also say that in parallel to that, we need to have the founder who had the vision, their role being sniffing out the new angles, right? And I've seen it time and time again when we've taken a business owner out of their operational roles and moved them into something a little bit more visionary, where the growth starts to pick up and the business starts to take on a new lifespan, right? So I think that there's very much part of that is the role of the business owner as well. I have a question coming back to the last thing that you talked about in terms of growth. There's a human side to this, right? And I love hearing you talk about entrepreneurship. That's something I've always wanted to sort of, poke into and see if I can stimulate in some of these more stagnant organizations. But there's a side of this too that is in high growth companies, there are some pretty human challenges. And when a high growth business starts to adopt big corporate HR practices and team building practices, they stop too. So in terms of indicators, how do you know when you've got the right, human perspective on your business, and how does that facilitate growth and scale?
Yeah, great question. I love this area of entrepreneurship as well. It fuels a lot of my energy. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and businesses have gotten the idea of culture wrong. And I've done this too. And some of my businesses have done this, where the idea is if we bring lunch in on Fridays and we have balloons and rainbows and unicorns, everybody's going to be happy. And I don't understand why we have a great culture. Let's have a fun culture. And the reality is, I think that more and more people are looking for a performance culture. Where they're well treated and things are going well. And so I've kind of switched a little bit of my thinking on this over the years, which is, can you have both, right? Can you have a really good and fun culture, but also be performance and accountable and run professionally at the same time, and not over red tape or over HR and organization, which actually ends up backfiring from my experience when there's too many rules, too many things, too many compliance directives and all those kinds of things. So from my viewpoint, a lot of it, Stephanie, I think there's a lack of this too, is the right onboarding, the right training, the right leadership, and then I'd say the right mentorship, right?
Mm.
Ted Ma, a speaker we had on one of our podcasts, right? There's managers, there's leaders, and there's mentors. The more mentors you have in your organization, or people that want to mentor other people, I think the more the people can grow and the faster they can grow. And at the end of it, I really think people are looking for growth for themselves within the company more than they're looking for the company to be a $100 million company or whatever it may be, right? As an entrepreneur, you want to feel like you're growing, that you're fulfilled, you're achieving really good things. And if there's too much red tape or too much compliance, they just get they get disengaged from that, in my view, in my opinion. And I'll say this last piece to your last point. One of the reasons of developing a culture of entrepreneurship is so that you as the entrepreneur can slowly replace yourself in every job function you hold, not hold it in. Your job is to replace yourself in every role and every task that you have. Find some in your organization who probably do that task better than you, quite frankly, even though you may not believe that today. There are people out there that can do some of those tasks better than you. Slowly release those and have those entrepreneurs jump into those roles. And that's growth for them. So it fulfills that mission of entrepreneurship, but also allows you to think more strategically on the business. Because the one point you made is we were always told as entrepreneurs, you got to work on your business, not in your business. And most entrepreneurs are like, yeah, how am I going to do that? I'm working 80 hours a week. My sleeves are up to here. Like, how am I supposed to work on the business? And the way you do that is you build a team of entrepreneurs that ultimately run that business without you. You can go on vacation for 2 months and not have to worry about, is the business still running back there? And that's a daunting task when you're first starting a company as a founder, but that should be your goal the whole time. Slowly replace yourself in every role that you function.
I want to ask one more question and then really just want you to run through your list because I think it's a great one. But to do that, what you just suggested requires you as a founder to actually, I think to your point, start early in understanding what the goal is, right? And Stephanie, in your work too, you work with these founders to start to be like, hey, your goal is to not work 80 hours a week and not be part of every single decision. But sometimes that's a tough mental shift for founders. I want to get both of your reactions on that one.
Well, I would say I have some founders that are doing the opposite. They think because they're the founder, they only have to work 40 hours a week right now when their business needs them for 80. And there's the opposite. There's some founders that are working 80 hours a week who wish they could work 40. And so it's finding that right balance, and when and how can you make those shifts and moves is really back to the function of how strong is your team. And so weaker leaders may not develop their team fast enough, so they feel all the pressure on their back. They can't not go in and do it. Whereas maybe some other times leaders build their team and just assume it's all okay, and they retract from the business, and the business doesn't perform well because they haven't built the right leadership yet to perform those tasks. So finding the right balance as to when to dive in a little bit more, pull back a little bit more, develop and lead your people is extremely tricky. And not enough entrepreneurs are sharpening their saw and developing those skill sets themselves.
Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And I think that's a sort of an excellent way of, characterizing what goes on. I would say that there's one other thing that I see happening, and that is that, especially in the tech world, like I come out of the tech industry, and you see these founders who maybe sort of are brilliant geniuses in the tech space, maybe not cut out to be leaders yet or haven't developed those skills. But whether it's that or whether it's, a coach over here who, does coaching and then builds up a coaching business, business owners often derive their value originally from this work that they do and that they're comfortable with. And when they're being forced to step into a new leadership role, it's very daunting and it's very uncertain. And so they keep going. They get nervous or anxious when they're not sure what to do to grow this business and to lead it. And so they go back to what they know. And you'll see a lot of business owners like go back to operational stuff. Oh, we just have to redesign our entire program, or we have to redesign this or do that. And when that's not the problem. In fact, the business that I bought, that was, the business owner's sort of modus operandi is, instead of sort of trying to solve the growth problems, she would go back to, well, let's just, redesign all our systems or redesign our courses. And it's like, that's not what, is going to have no effect, but that was where she was comfortable. So being aware of your blind spots, being aware of, what you're comfortable doing inside the business is sometimes one of the most, valuable things that you can do. And then having that, like your plan, your life plan, having your sort of vision for your new role in the business can sometimes help them stay out of that and, build up the team underneath.
I think there's a piece that just keeps coming up is just making sure you're surrounding yourself with smart people who tell the truth.
Yeah.
Because there are moments where they just be like, no, dude, you don't get to go do a spreadsheet right now. Like, you need to call customers. Like, that's what the job to be done is. John, just before we go into the speed round, I just want to give you, because we talked about a few of them, just walk through each of your seven steps, right?
7 principles, yeah.
These are 7 principles. Just walk through each and just give us a brief one. Everybody's going to go out and buy the book so they can read about it, but just give us a little teaser.
Okay, sounds good. Before I go through the 7 principles, I just want to come back to the beginning. If you do not have a 30-year life plan for yourself in all dimensions, health, financial, spiritual, wealth, career, relationships, if you don't know where you want to be 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, next year, do not pass go, do not collect 200. Don't even worry about the principles. Just stop recording, stop listening to this, go create your life plan. Know exactly what you're trying to do in your life, right? That's so critical. Then you need to have a strategic business plan. When you have those 2 pieces in place, principle 1 is protect and grow your equity at all costs. Number 2, build and grow your own capital for growth. Don't rely on banks and financiers. Go build your own capital with your products and services. Principle number 3, reinvest that capital smartly to generate more capital for your growth. That's the first place you need to go. Number 4, build a culture of entrepreneurship within your organization. Principle 5 is protect the house. There are so many vulnerabilities in running a business. You think you got all 99 holes in the boat filled, but that one hole you didn't fill, water is going to come, coming through it. So you got to get those all covered. Principle 6 is how do you access your owner's liquidity? A lot of owners believe that once they build their business, they got to exit in order to get the liquidity from their business off their balance sheet. There are ways to do that in tax efficient manners that I think are really important, so your business doesn't get suffocated by cash flow. By you taking money out, but that you can get liquidity out of your business. And principle 7 is how do you move from CEO to chairperson?
Still trying to figure that one out. Just, not really sure of a chairperson. Cut out to be a chairperson, Stephanie. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's your professionalism that I respect.
That was the wrong thing, but that's anyway. It was probably a good one to put in there. All right, John, are you ready for the speed round? Just going to give you a couple of questions, just quick first reactions, and we'll go through, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of these. All right. Protect equity or accelerate growth. Which builds more long-term wealth? I think we've asked and answered, but I'll ask it again.
Protect equity.
Own capital or investor capital, which gives you the most strategic flexibility?
Own capital.
Culture of entrepreneurship or traditional hierarchy, which scales better under pressure?
Culture of entrepreneurship and inverse hierarchy.
Inverse hierarchy, I like it. And reinvest everything or build reserves, which approach survives market downturns better?
Build reserves. Companies with 10 times more cash flow come out better.
Unbelievably good conversation. I think, Stephanie, I know I could have asked questions for another hour, but what did you learn from today's episode, Stephanie?
So we talked a little bit about, self-awareness and this intentionality around your own journey. And I think, what I hear is that this, your second time around was possible because of your own reflection and your own understanding of what had happened before. So I think that self-awareness is key for founders growing. When you focus solely on growth, there's a lot of pitfalls, and you use the term growing yourself poor. Seen that happen over and over again, and I think that's a really important sort of warning sign. The idea of having a 30-year life plan, totally agree with you. When founders don't know themselves and where they're headed on their own lives, they don't make the decisions that are congruent with that, and they end up over here spinning. We talked about what are the indicators for founders that they're sort of out of balance with that growth versus stability piece. And you talked about some indicators. Don't give away your equity so loosely. Know your net operating cash. Reinvest in your business, and then this concept of entrepreneurship, I just love it. And I want to talk about it more. But this is building those people and using mentorship inside of your organization. This is something I think founders just do not get yet. This is why I am building my new business.
And then I was going to say, people should call you.
Yeah. And then reinvest in your business in channels that are producing cash flow. So amazing conversation. Probably could have talked for another 2 hours.
I think in very much like deep dive recommendations, scaling up. You mentioned it, just a terrific book. It's funny. I haven't read that in a lot of years. It's like, I'm going to go back and read that book. I think it's a pretty good one. Profit First by Mike Michalowicz, I think I said his name correct. Really, really good book. There's a Harvard Business Review article called The Hidden Cost of Hypergrowth. I haven't read that one. That sounds good. And there's a podcast called Capital Allocation Strategies by the Acquirers podcast. And of course, John, we are all going to go buy your book. Tell us again the title. Where can we find it? Where can we review it? Where can we buy copies for our friends?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, the book is The $100 Million Journey, Your Path to Growing the Business of Your Dreams Without Falling Off the Cliff. You can get it on Amazon, or you can also go to 100mjourney.com or follow me on any socials at John St.Pierre 100 for your 100th episode. Congrats to you guys for your 100th episode as well.
It is just because we're too dumb to quit doing this is pretty much kind of most founder stories, actually. We're just too really don't want to quit. Awesome show. I think we have, Stephanie, do we have one more coming up this week? Do you know?
Yeah.
Off the top of your head?
At some ungodly hour on Thursday, I think.
I believe we have a show coming up on Thursday. Check LinkedIn on that. John, thank you so much again for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. Really good stuff. We'll all go buy the book. And I think with that, Stephanie, in for Mr. Anthony Franco, thank you for guest hosting with us. It's been great to do it.
My
I get
pleasure.
one more at bat with you before I have to deal with Anthony again. Which is, but again, I think we can. John, I don't think Anthony has enough equity. We can just vote him out right now.
Absolutely.
You're a third. You break the tie.
Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you again for joining us. Like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. Rate us on Apple Podcasts. We appreciate it. And you guys have a great day.
Thanks, guys.